There's a huge gap in B2B marketing today. It's driven by product teams that want to describe product features and benefits. And it's driven by sales teams that need pipeline filled tomorrow. It's why companies struggle with prospect indecision. It's why buyers can't tell the difference between one product and another. And it's why you probably spend money more than you need to, hand over fist, on Google Ads with low ROI. The fact is, unlike our B2C counterparts, many B2B companies have abandoned their brands. So, what as B2B marketers can we take away or learn from B2C so we can improve revenue? That's what I'd like to talk about, and more specifically, the role of branding in B2B marketing. I think with all this focus on demand generation in B2B, the art of brand building has been reduced as not very important. And I call it an art because B2B marketing has become almost completely metrics driven. If we can't derive a short-term ROI to the activity, we probably aren't going to do it. So you can just go to LinkedIn and search marketing jobs. At least half of those jobs have the title of demand, growth, or revenue. So focusing, I think, solely on demand leads to short-term campaigns that in some ways degrades the relationships you're trying to build in your industry. Think about it. You're not really providing value. Instead, you're interrupting people. Emails, cold calls, pop-up ads, even gated content. They typically all interrupt the prospect without providing value. Now, I'm not saying to forget about demand gen, but building a brand and creating value first will help make your campaign more successful. So when we consider B2C brands, think toothpaste or tires or water. Most B2C brands are not all that different from each other. In 2024, a listing was published ranking consumer brands. At the top of that list was Dawn dish soap. Now, maybe they sponsored this listing, but it's just funny to me. Thinking about sending or standing in this grocery store looking at dish soap, I don't want to overanalyze that kind of decision, right? I look at the brand and the price. Now, I don't know, one brand of soap from another. One's lemon scent and the other is orange. But for some reason, I think Dawn might be higher quality. Now, I'm frugal and may go with the lowest cost in this case, but if everything else was equal, I'd buy Dawn. Why? Because I've attached a level of quality to that brand. Now, the B2B buying process is much different than this, right? But remember, while we often have multiple decision makers in B2B, we're still selling to people. The decision process may be more analytical, but the same person making a B2B decision is the same person that's standing in that store looking at dish soap. So perhaps, another analogy that's better suited is buying a car. This is a big decision because it's a lot of money and you'll have this vehicle probably for a number of years. So in this case, you'll consider cars based on what you know about the brands. The companies, have obviously already invested heavily in these brands. So, you've seen them. You'll read reviews online and narrow your preferences probably down to a few models. Then you'll go in and talk with the sales rep and test drive the cars. Really, the last thing you want to do is go into the dealership too early. The second you get out of your car, you see the sales rep coming. He's basically intercepting you. And by this time, I would think that you probably know the car, you know the price, or at least the price range, and you know what questions you want to ask. The sales rep is really in this process the last step. So, and even another thing, a buying group. In this circumstance, your spouse may be a part of that decision. So there's definitely has to be a consensus. So it's much similar to this buying process, and it's really not that different than B2B. I have an interesting but related quote here. from Mimi Turner. She's from the B2B Marketing and B2B Institute on LinkedIn. She's credited as saying that if B2C marketers thought like B2B marketers, Coca-Cola would market itself as brown, fizzy, and sweet. Think about that for a minute. She's implying that B2B companies market their products based on features instead of the emotional ties that consumer brands leverage. There is this idea out there also, it's called product delusion. It's basically the belief that companies compete on the quality of their products. The better the product, the stronger the sales. And basically, in this case, the brand doesn't matter. This leads to ads touting product features and benefits. It leads to uninteresting, unengaging advertising. It leads to communications that your audience just doesn't give a shit about. So now, I have to say that, buying a soft drink is not the same as buying a car or selecting ERP software. But I would argue that the mental process people go through to make a decision is not all that different whether it's B2B or B2C. It's just that even for complex B2C products, investments in the brand help consumers take a shortcut. Really, the goal is to make the decision process easier based on trust that you've built over time. We want the same thing for B2B. So I think B2B can take a lesson here from the B2C playbook. When we think about the buying process, it's based on three things: product fit, our experience, and trust. Product fit is if that product will solve your problem and do basically what it's promised to do. It's the ROI of the solution. Experience is your lens on the world, considering similar products you've used and your perception of value. Trust is built over time, though interactions with the product, the company, through relationships and others that use the product, much like B2C, it's the attributes you associate with that solution. I know there is that famous quote from the 1980s that no one ever got fired for selecting an IBM. Now, the landscape is different today, and there's an even wider range of products and solutions. So, I would argue that the decision process today is even more complex. The idea of building this trusted brand, like in B2C, can help you develop this trust and help products stand out from this sea of similar products in the market. I think the analogy of no one getting fired for selecting an IBM rings true today when you think about the B2B selling process. In B2B SaaS, I know as a marketer and working closely with sales that often we feel like banging our heads against a wall. We know that our prospect will get value from our product. Their current product that they're using is inferior, and ours is a better fit for their needs. However, they procrastinate on the decision. They're stuck in this status quo mindset, and usually this lack of decision is the decision. And they're willing to stay with something that is good enough, even if it might not be the best solution. So perhaps in this situation, they've selected a competitor, not because it's as good as your solution, but because they've built trust around it. So in B2B marketing, and probably B2C, the higher the stakes, the greater the indecision. There's more risk involved in making a bad choice. This is what Matt Dixon describes in his book, The Jolt Effect. It's about changing the status quo, but it's more so about the fear of making the wrong decision. Now, Matt talks about ways to reduce fear through consultative selling and ways to reduce that risk during the sales process. But before this even happens, when there is a wide field of similar products, decision makers are already narrowing down the list of the brands they trust. It's the brand that's been referred to them, the brand they engaged with at a trade show, the brand where they have engaged in educational content. It's a brand with a voice and a presence in their industry. Now, if you've achieved this, the selling process is so much easier. There's less perceived risk to the buyer. And as we know, buyers are making product decisions well before they enter the sales process. Some have even estimated it as 70% of the process is complete before contacting a salesperson. It's kind of like going into the car lot to buy the vehicle. Now, it probably depends, again, on the product. It can depend on the industry. But the point is that you're being shortlisted or not based on the awareness and the trust you've built in advance. So what's the lesson here? And what can we take away from B2C marketing? I believe there's still a need for demand generation programs, even if they are disruptive. But these programs only target the 5% of buyers that are in market at any given time. The lesson then is that you need to establish yourself with the other 95% so that when there is a need, your solution is known, trusted, and shortlisted. This creates a presence in your market, but also leads to greater lead volume and higher close rates. So I think it's time that we stop looking at brand investments as separate line items that are at risk of cost cutting due to these short-term ROI measurements. I think it's time we stop looking at activities as either brand building or revenue generating, and instead consider these brand investments as part of your go-to-market, part of a holistic approach to building revenue that includes long-term investments where you provide value and create awareness with those that may not be in the market right now, with highly relevant messaging. So it's really, again, it's a holistic approach with an intentional brand communication strategy. And I don't mean brand in the sense of catchy jingles and polar bears, but having a voice in the industry and taking a consultative approach that describes risks, problems, solutions, and not necessarily your own solution. Remember, it's about building trust first, and you can't do that if you're in sales mode. Demand generation is capped. So if you're relying on demand generation alone, it's capped out. You can only grow the funnel so far, but by making investments consistently in your industry and developing brand trust, I think the sky's the limit. So, with that, please let me know what you think in the comments. Is there a need for branding in B2B marketing? Let me know.